All right, hopefully at this point, if you watch these last two videos, things are working out for you and you're starting to actually make some money. One of the first things that could happen is you're gonna start to need to pay some other people. If you pay someone less than 600 bucks, or if you're paying a corporation, the IRS doesn't really care. You can just write it off as a business expense and move on. But if you're building something and you're paying other freelancers like real rates, then here's what you gotta do. After they do the work, you gotta ask them to send you an invoice as well as that little form called a W-9. You might know this already because hopefully you've been giving W-9s to everybody that you've been doing work for. Take this W-9, put it in a little folder with the rest of your tax stuff, and come the end of the year, you have to register this payment with the government. Then you just gotta get a copy to that employee and you're done. Now, in the modern era of 2024, the government has finally figured out about the internet, and they'll let you jump through a bunch of confusing hoops to register these online, which honestly is great because the old easiest way to do it would have been through QuickBooks, and I kind of hate QuickBooks. If you start to work on some bigger budget jobs, it's probably also time to get some protections. For my business, there's 3 insurances that I get, and they're equipment insurance, general liability insurance, and workers' comp. Now, like all insurances, these are mathematically bad bets, and you don't have to have them. But some clients won't hire you if you don't have them, especially general liability insurance. When you're going into like a stranger's house or somebody else's place of business to set up a bunch of equipment, it's probably only a matter of time until somebody breaks something. So a ton of clients require that you have a general liability policy, and the good news is that $1 million liability policy is actually not all that expensive to get. Equipment insurance is in case talent decides to do something like drop one of my microphones in the toilet. Also, quite frankly, because I live in a place like DC. The workers' comp is again just because some clients want you to have it. The government requires bigger companies to have workers' comp, but it doesn't require that for sole proprietors because nobody works here but us. In a previous video, we talked about another way to protect yourself is to form an LLC instead of just being a sole proprietorship. And here, I'm gonna make the caveat that if you do both W-2 and 1099 work in the same industry, it can be really difficult to argue that your business and personal work are separate. I would assume that if your business structure is rock solid, then it will hold up in court, but it's super easy to pierce the corporate veil as a freelancer, so just keep that in mind. It might not be worth it to pay the extra fees you have to pay to be an LLC, and maybe just hold out until you can become something like an S Corp. Speaking of which, let's take a look at the advantage of the S Corporation. So this basically gives you some of the protections of the LLC and some of the advantages that big boy companies get. It's the first company structure we've talked about where the money you make is not necessarily your personal income. If you pay yourself a salary from the S Corp, any extra money you make can be left in the company or paid as a dividend rather than a salary. Now, you still have to pay a tax on all the money you make with an S Corp, but when that money is salary in particular, it's subject to payroll tax. And if you're not paying it as a salary, you save like 14% or something. The best part is you can still give yourself that money, you just have to call it a distribution, and it gets taxed at that lower rate. Now, the IRS does say you have to pay yourself a reasonable salary before you can start doing things like the dividend stuff, but that's the kind of nebulous talk that keeps accountants all over the world employed. There are a couple extra costs associated with being an S Corp, but if you get to the point where you have like $30K on top of what would be a reasonable salary, you can talk to an accountant about making the switch. You just want to make sure that you're going to save money after all the costs that come with being a corporation and payroll fees. That's going to be the end of the series for now. If I think of another video in the future that will be helpful, I'll throw it on the list, but hopefully with these 3 videos, you have enough information to get your business off the ground, and I'll see you out there.